Hearing Frank in a moment. What a game, Craig.
Oh. Well, there's always two sides to a story. And the first half was the Man United side that we've come to just obliterate.
They were so bad.
They were poor. They were second to every ball. They were wasteful in possession. They looked vulnerable at the back, and they didn't pick up properly from set pieces, right? Oh, and on top of that, Bruno Fernandes spent the first 45 minutes moaning and groaning and whining, right? Including the first Villa goal, which Leon Bailey was stood on the goalkeeper, but the laws changed years ago. He's not in an offside position. So that was Man United, his first 45, which obviously Villa were 2-0 up. But you have to give United so much credit for the change at half-time. And yes, Villa were complicit in at least a couple of the goals. When Diego Carlos plays a poor pass, when Longley tries to play out from the back and gives a corner away and they lose a goal. But all those mistakes came from a United side that just seemed to be, to me, 10 or 15 yards further up the field, where clearly Ten Hag said at half-time, listen, the keeper will take chances, the centre-halves will take chances, the midfielders will take chances, and they'll prod balls in there. And if we set off them, they'll continue to score goals and they'll beat us. But if we go and press them, and we ask them some questions, and we have some energy and pace, maybe they'll make some mistakes. And that's exactly what they did. Villa could not handle the United pressure in the second half. They forced them into poor mistakes. They paid the ultimate price for it. And that was so much better for Man United. But we've seen it before. We saw it for periods in the Chelsea game. So we're seeing little glimpses now and again. But that second 45 was the kind of intensity that the paying Man United public should be demanding to see more often.
The other thing about United, particularly in the second half, and Lee Dixon in our commentary touched on it, was that they are now, or certainly in the second half, played to their strengths. For so much, and you see so many teams, regardless of position in the league, try to play this total football we're going to build out from the back, which never suited United. It never suits who United are. It doesn't suit who their personnel are right now. You start with Garnacho and Rashford in wide areas, yet the focus is on building on from the back, as opposed to using those two players for their pace, trying to stretch Aston Villa, ask questions of that back four. And once I thought in the second half, United started to get a little bit more direct, started to play to those strengths, you saw Aston Villa recoil and Manchester United making the most of the players that they have available to them. And as a result, got the just rewards.
As I mentioned, Frank is here, Juls as well. Frank, what a turnaround in this game. What a second-half performance from United.
Yes, fantastic. Fantastic. I was very worried, 2-0 at halftime. I said, wow, that's going to be a disaster and Craig's going to be over the moon. I'm just teasing you, my man. But really, I saw that second half. I said, well, that's not the same man. It's not the same team. It's definitely not the same spirit. And it's what we are looking for. I mean, I like the fact you mentioned the way that teams are playing now with the building up, from the back, take the time, being precise. But I like the football with the spirit, with the intensity, with the pace that they showed during the second half. Like Newcastle does and did last season. It's the way I see my football, the football that I love, that the football I'm ready to pay to be entertained. And that's what I saw the second half. Everybody involved, everybody spot on. Yes, it's demanding, but it's what people want to see. They don't want to see something slow. They want to see something with spirit, with men capable of fighting against 11 other men who are maybe keeping the ball but not doing anything. And it's what happened. The Villains, they handled the first half easily because Manchester United didn't do anything. And when Manchester, as Craig mentioned, put everybody 15 yards upper on the field, it changed everything. Because the aggressiveness came up with the intensity that they put. It's what I like. It's the football I like. It's maybe tiring, but it's the way and the only way you can cope with teams like Villa, but also Manchester City or Paris Saint-Germain some years ago. You have to press the opponent.
What a moment, Juls, for Ramus Hojlund.
Incredible, and you saw with the celebration how much we often say, like, the cliche sentence is how much it means to him or to the fans, etc. But I think this time it was fair because, like Craig said, he had never scored yet in the Premier League. He had five goals in the Champions League, of course, but in the Premier League there was just nothing there. And for him to score that goal at that time as well, so it's not like if they were 3-0 down and he scored a consolation goal. This one he knew at the time was potentially the winning one too, and you saw, I mean, his face became so as red as the shirt almost. I thought he was going to explode, his face, at some point. But clearly all that kind of anger and frustration came out at the same time. And it's good, it's a really good finish. It's a number 9 finish because he was aware, he was on his toes, the ball bounced off a defender and then he was there. Maybe he's slightly lucky, but still, the way he hits it, but it was just there, perfect. And we've said before that the service has been quite poor to him, especially recently against, in the last game, he touched the ball, I think, once away at West Ham in the West Ham box for the whole hour that he played on the pitch, which is not good enough. And tonight, there were a couple of times where he was involved, bad touch, poor ball, things like that. But that finish and that goal, I think, will be a massive boost.
We saw Onana, of course, join in those celebrations, running the length of the pitch. What did you say, Shaq?
I wasn't doing that. That's a long way back. It's all fun and games running here to celebrate. When you hit that half line, you realize, goodness me, I still have a long way to go here.
Yep.
That's tiring.
I thought it was big, but I didn't think it was quite that big. It was a big goal for the young man, but not. But I think you can go to the other end of the field as well, particularly in the second half, and say, look, Garnacho with his goals, Hojlund with his goal, Rashford looked better, and yeah, they pressed. But at half-time, when Ten Hag said, look, we can't set off this side.
Right.
We just cannot set off this side. We need to go and force mistakes. And when they do that, that's leaving Raphael Varane, who has been out the side, and Johnny Evans, who's, I don't know, what's Johnny Evans, 36, 37. But that's definitely leaving them potentially more exposed to one of the hardest guys to handle in the Premier League. Certainly this season in Ollie Watkins. And I thought, although they didn't have to do it too many times, I thought Varane and Evans, bearing in mind, Varane hasn't played a lot recently, and Johnny Evans, I've talked about his age, I thought they did a really, really good job on Ollie Watkins in the second half. We barely saw Ollie Watkins in the second half, and whenever I see Villa play, he's a nightmare for defenders, an absolute nightmare for defenders. So I thought they did a good job as well, but they can't afford to have the type of performance that they had in the first 45 going forward, because they'll get beat. And so he somehow has to take this, and I don't know if he can or not, because we saw a very good performance against Chelsea, although Chelsea are not as good a side as Villa. It was still a big game, and we saw a United side that created 28 efforts at goal. They worked hard, they pressed, they had energy, and then after that game at Old Trafford, it sort of went away again. Ten Hag cannot afford it to go away again, then, because 3 or 4 games down the line, if it has, he's going to face the same questions again.
Tell me this. It's an easy statement to make
Dan,
from what we saw.
Dan, I'm sorry, Dan.
No, that's
Dan,
all right.
I'm sorry,
Don't worry,
because
Frank.
I
It wasn't
want
that
to
interesting.
talk about Onana and what Craig explained. But the thing is, you have a little margin between a real joy and a disaster. At 2-1 for Aston Villa, there is a big chance for Bailey, and Onana makes a great save and maybe made Manchester surviving. But don't forget that it's about football in its detail. What would have happened if Aston Villa would have scored at that time? I think it would have killed Manchester United. So yes, we can be enthusiastic about what they did second half. But as Bailey scored, it would have been a total different story, I think.
To that point, and as much as Frank is saying that maybe that Villa goal would have killed United, and possibly, when Garnacho's first goal was disallowed for the offside, my immediate reaction was, that just popped a bubble here for United. For all their good football, to have a goal disallowed so sloppily, Garnacho getting ahead of Rashford on that play, I thought that would have let all the air out of the room. But it didn't deter United any at all. And I give them a lot of credit for continuing that energy, continuing that tempo. And while we've rightly levied a lot of criticism against Manchester United, when he thinks defensively, I was looking at them forwards on that left-hand side where Bailey played on the right for Villa. A couple of weeks ago, Bailey absolutely tore Guardiola to shreds because he was left one-on-one. And in the first half, he was left one-on-one with Dalot, and I was like, here we go again. He is going to have a field day. But as the game wore on, and particularly in the second half, you saw Evans start to drift over more. And not once in the second half do I remember Bailey getting one-on-one with Dalot in the way that he was in the first. So I just felt that some of the little adjustments that United made were very effective. And adjustments well, I certainly don't recall seeing at any point this season.
Is it a valid statement to say this second half performance from Manchester United shows that the players are still very much behind Ten Hag?
Well, it's about standards. And the standard of that second half, particularly the work rate and the closing down, was pretty much perfect. So I think it's hard to argue that, look, it is crystal clear that there's been some issues in this camp, right? Tonight, in this game at Old Trafford, which was very timely because the Ineos investment has been announced and signed off, and the cameras kept panning to some people in the crowd that are high up in the Ineos management and will be involved in the structuring of the football department at Man United, and so it was very timely. But we've seen this before. So, you know, it's about consistency, it's about standards. This was a really good 45 minutes for them, after a really bad 45 minutes for them. But we've seen this movie, we've all seen this movie several times, maybe more than several times this season. So until this happens with any sort of consistency, I don't think we can quite turn this chapter.
I think one of the positives again is you're playing Aston Villa, a team near the top of the table who are playing with confidence, who are playing on the front foot, and certainly as a player you don't need any motivations. How do you fare, and I know West Ham just went, but how do you fare against teams in that middle of the pack? Teams who are happier to sit in and allow you to have the ball. Teams who don't allow you just to use your wingers and that pace of play. And how does that start to frustrate Manchester United? And then all of a sudden it becomes a very different conversation. And again, I know we were just off losing to West Ham, but if Manchester United do similarly with a Crystal Palace or Wolves or somebody mid-table-ish, what's the reaction, what's the response then?
Well, this is going to be it. On Saturday, they're away against Nottingham Forest, Jules. We'll learn a lot, won't we? Is this just a flash in the pan, as Craig said, against Chelsea? Or does this game really change their season around?
Yeah, exactly. And let's not forget that in the reverse fixture against Forest at Old Trafford, they were 2-0 down, United, and they came back to win 3-2. And when we're saying we've seen this before, we saw it at the end of August. That game was at the end of August, and we thought at the time, okay, now that game has kicked on their season. And yet after that, it was chaos, as we saw, and up and down, really more down than up, by the way. So today felt a little bit the same, and Villa are a better team than Forest this season, there's no doubt. And they were very disappointing, I thought, in their second half, Villa. But yeah, you're right. The next game against Forest, who obviously won today with Nuno, his first win, that would be a boost for them. They would play very differently than defensively and offensively than Villa did today. But they would be at home, and United would have to go away and travel to the City ground. So again, I think I agree with Frank in a way about the fact that there's also the McGinn chance at 2-2, by the way, that Evans saves with his foot, otherwise the ball goes in, and that's 3-2 for Villa then. So, but as always, in every game like this, there's always some pros and cons in a way. But United, hopefully for them, will have learned a lot from that second half and from the first half as well. And you would think that the boost from Hojlund, the boost for Garnacho, even collectively, what we saw in the second half will kind of inspire them to go to Forest and get something and then get on that run. They need a run. We've said it many times on the show. They need a really positive runs, like 4 or 5 games in a row without losing again, for to really look like they are on the right path.
Well, he just seems to me at the moment, Ten Hag is one of those managers when it's all going against him, there's a result pops up. you know, just to sort of...
Solskjaer had that as well, didn't he, during his tenure?
Yeah.
We just thought, right, that's it.
He did have that. Unfortunately, he didn't have any CV behind him to back it up any more than that. But you know, I think we're at that stage with Ten Hag, whereas if they go to Forest to have just beaten Newcastle, so they've got a little bit of confidence, it'll be at the City ground, and they feel a bit wrong from the start of the season because they felt the referee was horrendous that day at Old Trafford. They had a man sent off harshly. It feels like we'll be back to square one again, where the headlines will be, well,
Yes.
any of us are going to make the changes, Ten Hag's not the man. And I think it's hard to see United putting 3 or 4 really good results together because it is so inconsistent. But he is, you know, with the draw at Anfield, he dug out, you know, something that was tangible because everybody was thinking it was going to be 5 or 6 and he was going to get absolutely plastered. He didn't. Lose at West Ham and a very poor result. All of a sudden they're playing Villa. They're 2-0 down. Right, it's going to be 4 or 5. He's going to be... Tomorrow we're going to be reading he's out, he's sacked, and he's side turned it around, and he's kind of... There's only so long you can live on the edge, so it kind of feels like that for him at the moment. And so we'll see where they go from here. But we can only take it on this one game. And from what I saw in the second half and what we all saw, if he can sort of can that and take it forward with him, he's got half a chance. But if he, I would say, even in Newcastle's current predicament, bearing in mind it was at St James's Park, this you could argue was, you know, this was the surprise result of the day. I mean, I suppose Luton going to Sheffield United was huge, but they're 2 relegation sides. Nottingham Forest going up there, manager's second game in charge at St James's Park. This is a big shock and a big result for Forest.
And you can only make so many excuses, can't you?
Yeah, and it's the truth. Listen, while that truth still holds, that Newcastle United are simply exhausted, you only have to look at the first goal that came just before the break, when Elanga breaks. If you look at Bruno Guimaraes and Lewis Miley, they have no legs to even attempt to keep pace with Nottingham Forest. So while, yes, Newcastle are tired, they don't have the legs, for all the reasons that we've been discussing for many a week, at some point that style has to, your approach has to adjust. It has to take that into some kind of account. If your midfield is as exhausted as they are, you cannot keep pressing as high up the park as you do. You cannot play this high defensive line knowing that the midfield can't close spaces down in the midfield, and more times than not, it's just going to be a free clip in behind the back 4 to allow players to run in behind. So those 2 things, again, you have to make those adjustments. And while we sat here and kind of praised Pochettino for taking that similar aggressive style, even though he had injuries, it's different for Newcastle United. It's different for Eddie Howe. He's been there a whole lot longer. And you can make those adjustments without really compromising who you are. You're standing with the team. I just feel, given all their issues, there has been no attempt to adjust accordingly.
This story will change quickly for him.
Very much so. Yeah.
It'll change. Sorry, Frank. It'll change very, very quickly for him because the sympathy and the empathy is starting to fade. And nobody's denying that, for the most part, the job he has done there is a really good one. But we're in the modern game now. It's here and now, and their performances in his in-game management is starting to be questioned.
Right.
And tactics and how he approaches it, and he's going to have to turn this round because he's got an ownership that, you know, is going to be very demanding. And I think this is worrying for him. And a month ago, I probably wasn't on that page. But I think in this league, and I think that's why Unai Emery, when we discuss Villa, is going to be at his players because the narrative turns very quickly. Not that Unai Emery is under pressure, he's not. But they could quickly drop out of, you know, being afterthought for the top 4 with Tottenham and all the rest of them. And I think from Newcastle's perspective, if he doesn't stop this ship, which currently is sinking a little bit, then there's going to be a lot of questions. A lot of questions about Eddie Howe going forward.
Do you think Steve will admit they've regressed yet?
No, of course not.
Go on, Frank.
Yeah, I just want to say that, everybody thought, that it's bad luck for Newcastle, and everybody has sympathy for Eddie Howe and the Newcastle players and the list of injuries that they have there. Okay, that's a fact, but maybe you can wonder why they're so much injured. Why they have a list of so many players not being able to play. I remember at my time, where Arsenal had that time of players also injured. I don't know if do you remember, guys. The medical staff was targeting, and maybe it's the time to find why so many players are getting injured. It's not because of the World Cup was a year ago. Is it still that? Where I was said no. Maybe the physical staff or maybe the medical staff don't do their job. Doesn't do their job. Doesn't do their job, and they have to maybe try to find where the thing has gone wrong in that matter. Maybe they prepare too much. They work too much in the preseason last summer. Maybe when they have players who are getting a little bit injured, the medical staff doesn't do the job. But there might be a reason why you have that list of players not being able to play.
But whatever way you butter this was still a strong Newcastle side today.
Right.
And recent weeks he's had a weak bench. This was not. It's not his strongest bench, but it wasn't a weak bench today. He had experienced players on there. Callum Wilson was on the bench. Livramento was on the bench. There was others experienced players on the bench. It's not like he was playing his old three goalkeeper on the bench trick again, which he's done before, looking for a little bit of sympathy. So he had a strong 11 and he had a relatively strong bench. So that argument is going to start to falter because people will turn around and say, well, hold on a minute. You've got European football, but there's a lot of other teams that are tired.
Yeah. I think to that point, I think playing European football for the first time in nearly 20 years, it's a bit of a learning curve, and that's what they're experiencing. But I think in today's game against Nottingham Forest, I believe Eddie Howe's thinking is some of these players need a rest. You can start with Livramento on the bench, but then you try to make changes. But at this point, the game is gone. Again, for me, it's these next few weeks, and Newcastle have a horrid run of games to come. But they are so key to not just Newcastle's season, but to Eddie Howe. I just feel that you've got to adjust given your personnel, whether everybody's fit, whether everybody's tired, whether they have the pace to match up against. And I just don't think there's been any kind of adjustment. Albeit you come up against Nottingham Forest thinking, today of all days is a day I can rest and rotate players. But no, you don't adjust accordingly. Look what happens.
How bad a PSG can't even beat Newcastle, Jules? Anyway, just a reminder, ESPN FC. Yeah, go on.
No, just quickly, because Shaka mentioned it, they play Liverpool, City and Aston Villa next in the Premier League and Sunderland away in the FA Cup in one of the biggest derbies in England, of course. So things could get worse before they even get better for Eddie Howe and Newcastle.
Just a reminder, plenty of content over on our YouTube channel. Be sure to go over to ESPN FC and subscribe. Not long now until the transfer window opens for January. And of course, to keep up to date with all the latest news, go over to Transfer Talk on the website. On that subject, Jules was given the task of giving the top 5 transfer needs to the big clubs across Europe. Go for it, Jules.
So in number 5, Giovanni Reina, he needs to move now. He's hardly played with Dortmund, no start in the Bundesliga. He played only 229 minutes. He's 21 years old. There are big things coming up for him and the national team, of course. But he just needs to play. Wherever that is, he could maybe drop the bit of a level of the team. It doesn't have to be for a top European club, but he needs game time. He needs that rhythm. He needs that. It's too much of a race right now. So that's number 5. Number 4. I mean, we mentioned Chelsea and a striker before, even with Nkunku coming back from injury and scoring, by the way, the other day against Wolves. They still need a proper number 9, an in-and-out striker, not Broja, not Nico Jackson, not even Nkunku on his own up front. They need to go and get somebody. We've said it all through the first half of the season. So this is one of the biggest needs, if not the only one, really, that they need to address in this January. As a number 3, I mean, we said that Real Madrid also needed a centre-back before. Remember the Thiago Silva, Steven Nicol idea? Of course, well, we know that with Alaba out for the whole season, Militao as well. They need to go and get somebody else. There's talks about Rafa Marino, who's on loan obviously at Alaves from the club. Rafael Varane even to come back. Maybe Gonzalo Ignacio at Sporting, who's a very promising but expensive young centre-back from Portugal. So they need to find somebody for sure to come and strengthen that defence. In number 2, Sir Jim Ratcliffe is arriving at Manchester United. He needs to pick the right sporting director. They need the right guy for them to take them again forward, back towards the summit, whether that's Paul Mitchell, Paolo Maldini, Dan Ashworth, whatever. But they need the right guy, not more Fletcher or Murto or people like that. And then finally, obviously, and the most important, PSG needs Kylian Mbappe to extend his deal. Of course they do. He becomes a free agent on January the 1st. He will be allowed to sign anywhere he wants.
Here we go
There's
again.
only one place for you, Kylian. One place for you, my friend. Is staying at home in Paris.
I was
Going so well.
I was kind of jogging along with that until he got to number 1.
I thought Real Madrid after.
And he didn't even think Arsenal need to buy a left back.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go.
There you are.
Or a striker.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Or a striker.
Would you like to add anything to that, Shaq? No.
That's a stupid
I'm
question.
in no
Would he
position.
like to add anything?
I don't know. I thought he might. I just asked.
After my latest debacle, leave no
Yes.
Giroud.
Oh, was it? I heard you had a little.
Yeah, if
Little faux pas. Little faux pas.
You dropped the ball.
Frank, would you like to add anything?
Newcastle needs to buy 10 other players.
Okay, all right. That's good. Well, meanwhile, of course, last week all the headlines are about the Super League decision in court. We've had a little bit of time now for things to settle. Very different, depending which country you're in, as to how people reacted. Superliga, okay. The front page of Superliga, yes. Obviously.
No, we didn't have time to reflect.
Say again?
No, we haven't had time to reflect.
Look, he's going to tennis camp. He wants to talk about
Yeah,
this.
but listen, let me tell you. Right, let me tell you what's happened here. Nobody's had time to reflect. It was Christmas and nobody cares.
Right, okay.
That's what happened. It was Christmas.
Yeah.
People are spending time
Right.
at home with family and
Yes.
friends, and nobody gives a jot, an absolute